So at this time, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Frederic Bertley, President and CEO of COSI. As Dr. Bertley is making his way to the stage, I can tell you that he is leading the Central Ohio Science Center to its next great iteration in a legacy of successful science center history. Prior to being president and CEO of COSI, Dr. Bertley was the Senior Vice President for Science and Education, where he oversaw a diverse portfolio of initiatives supporting innovation in STEM learning, as well as departments and programs that capture history and legacy of the Franklin Institute, such as the Benjamin Franklin Awards Program. And I can tell you, in the short time that I've got to know Dr. Bertley, I can tell you he is an amazing addition to Central Ohio. And the conversations going on around COSI are just one piece of how we define a great community. And he is already contributing in a way that I know is inclusive, that I know will expand the richness of the history of COSI, and most importantly, will strengthen Central Ohio in a broad way for everyone. And so do me a favor, give Dr. Bertley a round of applause as he makes his way to the stage, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to pause for a little bit so I can say that I was actually in the bathroom texting that I should come on stage to make Commissioner Boyce feel better. First of all, I want to thank him and his whole team for this amazing council that's been formed. This is the second year. I'm humbled to be asked to address all of you. I also want to echo and just really thank Councilwoman Brown's words. I thought they were very, very on point and very timely. I will be a positive story, however. But before I get to that, Commissioner Boyce said you can't achieve what you achieve in any way without a great team or staff. And it's my privilege to work with some great folks from COSI who are over here. So I just want to thank you. Behind every good person is a team of folks getting the real work done. So thank you. And also, I do want to apologize. After my presentation, I will have to step out. I'm catching a flight later today, and I'm probably grabbing all my team members because we have some meetings to get through. With that, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. So this is an immigrant story with two parts. There'll be a little bit of science, a little bit of immigrants, but I'll walk you through it. It really is all about this. As an immigrant, this document, We the People, is so important. It's not we the white people, we the black people, we the female people, we the male people. It is we the people. And there is no other better document written in history, arguably. So the first part is really about this guy. For those of you who can't see the stunning resemblance, these were the good old days when I was able to grow hair. That has since left me. This is me. So the question is, how did I go from that to be the presidency of COSI, right? So here's where it begins. Oh, come on, you guys gotta go, right? I wish this is really began for me. It kind of sort of did. Obviously, this is the Caribbean Ocean. It did begin in the Caribbean. It began with this group. And no, this is not the Jackson 5. First of all, we were not nearly that talented. Second of all, as you can see, there are 6 people in this plus a cat, so that's not us. But it really began with these two folks. My dad, who was from Trinidad and Tobago, and my mom, who's from Barbados, and they emigrated to Canada and decided to have the 4 of us in Canada. So for all disclosure, I'm Canadian. And of course, that's me at the corner. Anybody who knows me knows I love wearing interesting socks. It started way back then. You can see they're mismatched as a 4-year-old. All right, so, you know, how did I go from that into becoming a scientist? And it really gets down to this, what can be some of the simplest things. Who recognizes this in the crowd? All right, for you young people out there, this is the old school version of the new school kind of handheld gaming device that kids use today. So I had this paper route. I was 9 years old, I wanted to buy this game. Like all immigrant parents, even though the paper route was my job, it really wasn't my money. I had to put it in the bank and I had to beg their permission to spend it. Finally, I begged and begged, they let me buy my first thing. So I bought this game and it was just this unbelievable fun thing. I was playing, but it would chew through those 9-volt, you know those square batteries? It would chew through them really quickly. I didn't have money to keep buying them. I didn't want to keep going back to my parents. So finally I had this, what I thought was an ingenious idea. Went down into the basement, found an old lamp, took out the back of the football game, and you know how the the square battery pulls apart and there's a red and black wire. Took the old lamp, cut the cable off the lamp, attached it to the black and red wire, plugged it in. Ladies and gentlemen, the best 10 seconds of my life. I was playing this game. I was like, oh, I can't wait till school's finished. I'm gonna play some more. I was so excited. 11-second, poof. The game exploded. And at the outlet, it's not exaggeration, the outlet was charred and there was flamed around on the wall. My father comes down, hey son, what you doing? You trying to burn down the place? I'm like, no, Dad, no. And it was interesting because what was really happening to me, that was my first aha moment, that this thing we take for granted called electricity is really an amazing thing. It's more complicated than just switching on a light or plugging something in the outlet, but really there's something magical that's happening behind that wall, and that got me hooked on science ever since. And so if you have kids who are exploring stuff and doing things, hopefully they won't burn down the house, but if they're doing things, definitely support that because it can be a gateway to important things. And so that's how I got here, trying to pretend I'm cool, by the way. That's my I'm a cool guy shot. But I'm still a science nerd, for all disclosure. So I went to McGill University for undergrad in mathematics and physiology, and then I left the country, emigrated to the United States to join a team at Harvard and MIT to continue my research. And became an immunologist, so that's my specialty is the immune system, how you fight cancer, vaccines, that kind of stuff. And I want to pause here and just mention that through science, I've been able to see the world. And this is an important lesson for any young person. If you don't have the capacity, the financial capacity to travel, which is so important for some of the reasons that were echoed this morning, really going beyond your borders, seeing how other people live is critical. And science can help you do that. So I've had the pleasure of traveling to or living in numerous places around the world, including I'm living in Peru, which was fascinating, learning about the Peruvian culture. I'm spending a lot of time in the Canadian Arctic. That is not me in the bottom right plunging into the Arctic Ocean, but there's some horror stories there I'll share with you after hours. Spent a lot of time living in Haiti, doing some really cool things there. And just really expanding my mind, traveling the world, seeing how different cultures as a Canadian boy, but really expanding my horizons. Spending a lot of time living in the Sudan. And I gotta tell you, the Muslim brothers and sisters there, just an amazing group of people that I got to relate to. And I put this picture because you all know about snowstorms, and we had a bad rainstorm last weekend. Well, if you haven't experienced a sandstorm, this is what it looks like. And it's unbelievable when it comes to you. All right. That all led me to my work at Harvard. I joined the HIV vaccine research group and again, did lots of travel. But then I left the bench, and again, this is an important lesson when we think about careers for all people, especially immigrating populations. Science can be a gateway to the world. So it got me into intellectual property. I'm not a lawyer, so many of you counsel folks out there who are great attorneys, I'm not one, but I did work at a great law firm doing patent prosecution, trademark, and copyright work. But ultimately, the marrow that is in my bones is really around education, and in particular, science education and science literacy. And that led me to what Commissioner Boyce referred to as the Franklin Institute, which is the nation's oldest science center in Philadelphia. So if you've been to Philadelphia, if you've been to the Art Museum in the Rocky Steps, it's right in that region. It's a great science center. And through that, continued to have the privilege to go to some amazing countries, did a lot of work in Egypt, did a lot of work in China, Germany, and even in Senegal. And that further broadened my horizons. So when you talk about being tolerant to immigrant populations, being tolerant to refugee populations, traveling is the best elixir to help you get there because you just get attached and endeared by meeting different people. And so all of that, of course, prepared me for my greatest journey, which is here to Franklin County, to the best place on earth, COSI. Who has been to COSI? Hands in the air. All right, fantastic. I'd love to have you back, so just email me, tell me you're coming. I'd love to host you. Which brings me to part 2 of the presentation. And as a scientist, I want to elect to be able to collect some data. Is that okay if I can ask you guys some questions? All right, so first question. How many of you have used electricity today? All of you in the front, all the hands are going up. How many of you had a prescription from a doctor in the last 4 years? I won't ask you what that was. How many of you have heard or seen this equation? And I apologize for how heard is spelled, if it's spelled incorrectly. E is equal to MC squared. We've all heard of that or seen that? Fair enough. How many of you use Apple products? Again, all the hands. How many of you searched using Google on a handheld or touch screen? How many of you wear clothes? And how many of you eat food? All right, so, okay, fair enough. So, I mean, we didn't have that fancy, Commissioner Boyce electronic survey technology, but it's fair to say that it's 100% across the board, all your hands went up for all the questions. So, it's really, while funny, it's really to underscore the point that, ladies and gentlemen, today we are in a science and technology world, whether you like it or not. If you don't think you are, see if you can wake up tomorrow morning and get through the day without using your handheld device. So as soon as you wake up, you do like the rest of us. What did President Trump tweet today? Sorry, I had to have one funny political joke. All right, or if you're eating food, you're talking about that. That, unless you shop religiously at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods, the food's been genetically modified. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad or a good thing. I know it's great intentions to feed the world, but that's a reality. The clothes you wear. Commissioner Boyce has the best, fanciest suits on the planet. Guess what? Sorry to put you on the spot, but no, really, all our clothes, engineers and material scientists have spent billions of dollars. Just ask L Brand. I mean, trying to figure out the science to make things stain resistant, et cetera. That's all science and technology, all right? So we really are surrounded by that. And so there's a group of engineers in this country called basically the best engineers, called the National Academy of Engineers, based in DC, but they're from around the country, and they came up with 14 grand challenges. I won't read through them all, but everything from clean water, solar energy, cyberspace, security, et cetera. And they say that if they can solve these 14 grand challenges, they won't just make, to Langston Hughes' point, America the best country on the planet, it'll make the world a better place, right? And what's amazing about this group of engineers, ladies and gentlemen, while it's the United States National Academy of Engineers, they work and partner with scientists and engineers from all around the world. And that's critical to supporting this whole science, technology, engineering, and math space that we live in. All right. I want to walk you through a few things just to kind of level set where we are in this 21st century technology race. There's something called quantum dots, okay? These are nanoparticles, meaning they're very small, you can't see them with the naked eye, but they have this capacity of capturing light energy and emitting it in powerful and very slow ways, all right? Here's just a jar with liquid nanoparticles in them, these quantum dots, and what can you use them for? Who's taken biology in high school at one point? Okay, again, almost every hand is in the air. So you remember that time you had to either peel back the onion or you swab your cheek cells and you had to put on that little glass slide and you put on the microscope. Do you guys remember doing that? And you have to look in there and you're looking in there and the teacher's telling you, oh, have you identified the membrane? And we all did the same thing. We lied to our teacher. Sure, I can see the membrane. I can see. You couldn't see anything, right? We all know that. But now you can show this. You can stain some biological cells, show this to a 4-year-old, and you can immediately see for really cheap where the membrane is, where the nucleus, the pink stuff is the DNA. This is unbelievable, right? But there are even more powerful uses for these dots. My favorite is this. It looks like conventional paint. It's not. It's a paint that has these chemoluminescent particles, these particles that give off light energy. And you take the paint and you roll it on your wall or on the ceiling. You take a small electric charge, dissimilar from my lamp in the basement experience. You take a small electric charge, hook it to a switch, click it on, and the paint glows. This is going to revolutionize lighting forever. Now, it's not available today, so don't run over to Lowe's or Home Depot and say, hey, the president of COSI said this stuff is there. It's not there yet, but roughly 8 to 10 years, this stuff will be there and it'll be ubiquitous. Right? What about the field of engineering? Anything happening there? Anybody like cars? Here's a fancy, very expensive Italian sports car. It's a fun sports car, but it's not great for the environment, high pollution, et cetera. Well, some colleagues at the MIT Media Lab are working on a new kind of car. Here's a cartoon of it. Here's the actual schematic. The car folds up, and it can seat 2 full-grown adults. It's 100% electric. You get in your car. Here are prototypes. You check it out like a grocery cart. You go to your destination, you go up to about 40, 45 miles an hour. You park it, go about your business, come back and take another one. This is unbelievable. Low traffic pollution, obviously environmentally friendly. It's 100% electric, and also really cool. What about this gentleman? Most of you know him. He's Dean Kamen. If you don't recognize his face, you recognize one of his inventions. He's the person who invented the Segway. He's arguably the country's greatest engineer with about 440 patents, right? And so while the Segway is fun, even more cool are these black boxes that you see there. It's called the Slingshot, and if anybody's a Netflix junkie like I am, go to Netflix. There's a documentary called Slingshot, talks all about this. It's fascinating. It makes purified, drinkable water out of any liquid source. That's right. And kids always ask me, you mean pee-pee, Dr. B? Yes, I mean pee-pee. Any liquid source, it'll go through this process and we'll drink it. Now here in Columbus, it's not a big deal. We take it for granted. You go home, you turn on the tap, you got water, you can bathe, you can drink it. But ladies and gentlemen, 2/3 of the world does not have access to clean water. And 50%, percents of all the deaths that happen on this planet happen because people don't have access to simple, clean water. So now this is being tested in villages around the world, bringing clean water to populations that used to have to hike 6 to 8 hours just to get a bucket of dirty water. Unbelievable stuff. All right, I'm a life scientist. How about the field of genomics? Everybody know what that is? All right, you remember the name of the movie? Finding Nemo, that's right. So I got some good news and some bad news. What would you like first? You guys are terrible. All right, well, I'm going to give you the good news first. The good news is we found Nemo. The bad news is, as biologists, and this is a true story, by the way, we plucked out its DNA, and then we cloned the DNA, meaning we just made copies of it. You dump it in bacteria, the bacteria replicates, and boom, you get massive amounts of DNA you want. So the question is, why as biologists would we pull DNA out from Nemo, and what did we do with it? All right, well, what we did with it is we put it in a tomato. Now you guys are like, Dr. B, what are you talking about? You're trying to sell me a bill of goods here. No. What happens is, and I told a little fib, it wasn't really Nemo, but it was a real fish called the Canadian Arctic whitefish that lives in the Arctic Ocean. Now, if you and I try to do that dive that you saw in the Arctic Ocean picture earlier on and fall in the Arctic Ocean, we'll die in about 15 minutes because our bodies can't thermoregulate. We can't handle that cold temperature and we'll die from hypothermia. But there's certain wildlife that can. Polar bears can do it, and there's certain fish, including the Canadian Arctic whitefish. So biologists identified the DNA, the gene that's responsible for allowing that fish to thermoregulate and handle those cold temperatures, and they transfected it or put it into a tomato because if you're a tomato farmer, you know that you can grow crops for 3 to 4 months, but you get that one frost in September or in October, and you can lose everything. Unbelievable, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to genetically modified organisms. All right, so I hope to have convinced you that we really are in a high-tech society. If you're thinking about jobs, which we're all concerned about, amazing opportunities in science, technology, engineering, math. Here's just a paper that talks about it, but there's so much literature talking about the availability of jobs. Here's a graph that says by 2020, 50% of the jobs in this country, including, of course, the state of Ohio, will be specifically related to science or technology, engineering, and mathematics skills. Unbelievable. Here's just a graph showing you how STEM-based jobs are increasing while other occupations are kind of flatlined. Here's just a graphic showing you all the different things you can do with just a bachelor's degree in biology. I'm not talking about a PhD scientist, just a bachelor's degree. Here are different occupations that are open to you. Similarly for chemistry and physics, if you're into engineering, there's a plethora of opportunities there. And so if STEM is everywhere, and innovation is hot, I've showed you some cool things, and there are a lot of opportunities for careers, what's the problem? Well, there are a few problems, but we'll talk about two because of time. One is this. The first public school is called Boston Latin. It's in Boston, it's still there, started in 1635. 1 year later, 1636, Harvard opened up to accept the students from Boston Latin. All right, your parents walked you to school, you went to school, and here's a real photograph of Boston Latin in the early 1800s, 1825-ish. And what do you all notice? All white people. I love you in the back. Fair enough. So they fixed that a few years later, or many years later. They tried to integrate that. So all white people. All what else? All boys. Okay, for you people who are close, what do you notice about the kids? Right, they look miserable, completely unhappy. And you had these two people at the back that were like wizards. They had all this information, and they'd lecture to you from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, and you'd write everything down in a little chalkboard, and then you'd memorize it, and 2 weeks later you'd have a test and you'd regurgitate it, right? That's what school was in the 1600s and 1800s. And it made sense, because that's how you transferred information. Somebody had it, and through the oral tradition, they told it to you and you studied it, or if you were rich, you went to this thing called the library and pulled out a scroll and were able to write stuff down, right? Well, ladies and gentlemen, when you think about society, most of us don't take a horse to work. Most of us aren't beating on a drum or sending smoke signals to communicate, right? The medicines we take, we're not necessarily chewing on a tree bark anymore. We have sophisticated medicines. You name it, every aspect of society has moved forward, transportation, communication. But the one thing that's still backwards is a general education system across this country, right? Now, good news, in Columbus and Ohio, there are satellites that are doing phenomenal stuff, like the Metro Institute of Technology School and a few other STEM schools that are innovative. But in general, we haven't moved forward. And if you look at today's classrooms in most public schools, this is what you see. Desks in rows, students are not there. Why? This is where they are. They've checked out. They're so caught in this digital divide, that's what captures their time. So we need to think about how do we have a different kind of education system, especially a STEM-based system that is inclusive. And so important with this dialogue around immigration and refugees that includes all people, but especially the quote-unquote underserved population. Because ladies and gentlemen, this is what America looks like today. Regardless of if you're a Republican or a Democrat, we are living in a diverse population with different ethnicities, different cultures, whether refugee, whether immigrant, what have you. This is a reality. And so we got to make sure we have those opportunities for all folks. And so we want to change at COSI the old science bus that looks like, the mom waving to the one lonely white boy on the bus who's waving back to his mom. We want to change that so that the bus is completely inclusive. Look at the smiles on the kids' faces, right? And you have everybody, boys and girls, and especially black and brown populations. All right. So the second thing, and this is near and dear to my heart, is we are living in a less and less STEM literate society. And let me explain what I mean by that. So the National Science Foundation and a bunch of other organizations have done a whole bunch of studies just measuring science literacy across the country. And this is the first slide I'll show you. 1/4 of Americans, nobody in this room, but 1/4 of Americans still believe the sun revolves around the earth and the earth is the center of the universe. It's a true story, all right? 2, people who are still discussing climate change. Here's a cartoon that looks at it. You got Santa's elf saying, the jury's still out. Meanwhile, you can see all the North Pole is melting and shrinking. We're a little better here. We're up to like 70% of Americans are starting to believe it. But then my favorite, and this is relevant to COSI because we will be bringing dinosaurs in November. So make sure absolutely, we're very excited about that. And real quick, for those of you who don't know, that's a partnership with the American Museum of Natural History. And for you folks in Central Ohio, you need to understand that they're the #1 natural history museum in the world, and they chose Columbus to partner with. So that says a lot of the great work you all do. With that said, it's important we're bringing dinosaurs here because, believe it or not, 41% of Americans still think that dinosaurs and humans lived together. We didn't. Shocker, we didn't. But this I understand. I give a little kind of break for this because I used to think it too. Why? I grew up in the 70s, 80s, and I was a cartoon junkie, and I used to watch Hanna-Barbera. My favorite cartoon was the Flintstones. You guys remember this? There was that green guy named Kazoo. He would grant you wishes. Okay. But what did Fred do every morning? Got in that bottomless car, right? Got to work, sat on the back of a dinosaur, and quarried rocks. So I give a little break here. But no, we did not coexist. There's a little gap, or a very big gap, between humans and dinosaurs. So what do we need, folks? We need new ideas, and just as was said earlier, we need to be innovative as a population, as a city, as a country. So that's why I applaud Franklin County and the city of Columbus for what they're doing, because there's so many amazing points where they are serving us in an innovative, transformative way. I'll just go through a few of them. I mean, in my short tenure here, I've been here for about 4.5 months. I've got to meet many of you in the room and many other folks outside this room, and it's been amazing to see just all the amazing organizations that are keeping Columbus that 21st century cutting-edge city that people want to come to as a destination. And all people, immigrants, refugees, other people in the U.S. are migrating here because we're doing some great stuff. Education is critical. Well, we have one of the largest densities of colleges and universities in the country. And forgive me if your alma mater is not on the slide. I couldn't fit them all, but you can't stretch your hands in Greater Columbus area and not hit a university. And they're doing so many innovative things around education in general, but specifically science education. And this is so important when you think about immigration and refugees, because, ladies and gentlemen, 10 to 20% of all professors at these colleges are immigrants. And if you're looking into science disciplines, that rises to 30 to sometimes 50% of college professors in science and engineering aren't born in this country, right? Absolutely. You think of the cultural institutions. We have a great zoo. We have the Franklin Conservatory. We have a fantastic museum. We have the library. These are all institutions that are cultural institutions and are serving all people, not just quote-unquote born and raised Americans, but immigrants and refugees alike, with programming, mind you, that's relevant to these immigrant populations. And we have to definitely support that. Of course, I got to layer COSI on top of it, a little bit of bias, but really we're all doing great things to make sure we're supplying experiences for all people. And but it doesn't just stop there. If you think about the growing technology and venture capital investment in the tech disciplines, in this city. It's unbelievable. Every day I meet another person who's working with either Drive Capital or some other group to really bring first-rate technology here. And if you're not impressed by that, we all know about the Smart Cities grant, right? This is unbelievable. We're talking about what started off as around 50 to 60 million, then grew to about 150 million. I'm now hearing around 500 to 600 million dollars coming into this city because this city won the challenge to figure out how to be the nation's first smart city around transportation. So driverless cars, electric cars, etc. This is unbelievably amazing, and this is what has made Columbus, and I love whoever came up with this graphic, kudos, because Columbus and Greater Columbus, Central Ohio is really all about us. And that's where the relevant narrative is for the immigrants and the refugees who are choosing this city, who are choosing Central Ohio to make their home. I know there was some, when Councilwoman Brown was talking about, some of the tough stuff across the country. That is true. But as someone who's emigrated here, I can tell you, my wife has never been so warmly received ever more than in the city of Columbus. So thank you for that. I want to applaud all of you for that because it's absolutely amazing. And so I want to revisit these questions that I asked at the beginning. How many of you use electricity today? You all said, put your hand up. How many of you used Apple products? Almost everyone. How many of you search on Google? Clearly everyone. Touchscreen, everyone. And how many of you seen the equation? Everyone. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have electricity in this country and around the world because of this gentleman, Tesla, an immigrant from Serbia. He's the guy who gave us the AC current that we use today. If you use Apple products, we all know Steve Jobs is a genius behind that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know this, his father was a Syrian who emigrated to this country. If you use Google, the two founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, well, Sergey Brin, hint, he is from Russia, emigrated to this country. Right? You think of the touchscreen, it was invented by this guy named Jeff Hahn. He actually launched it to the world in 2006. One of the earliest TED Talks, check it out, it's amazing, changed our lives forever. His parents were immigrants from Vietnam, right? And then you talk about E equals MC squared. Well, first of all, Einstein, that's his equation. He was an immigrant. But today, the #1 scientist and mathematician is an African-American who is an immigrant to this country. He's a physicist and mathematician at Duke University. He's continuing the work on E equals MC squared and other energy-related equations. And then you can't leave off Elon Musk if you're talking about amazing immigrants that have done wonderful jobs. He's born in South Africa. I'm proud to say he's a Canadian. And now he's an American. But again, changing the world, right? So when we think about immigrants and refugees, we have to make sure we really think clearly and appreciate this, we the people, because these people who are crossing into the borders and coming into our cities and states are part of that transformational pool that will continue to make this the greatest nation on earth to live. And so with that, I'm thrilled to be part of the New American Forum, to go from this little guy emigrating from Canada to the US and being warmly welcomed in the greatest city on earth. So thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to speak with all of you.